Okay, so as a quick summary of what we just said, really important parts historically, that means context, right? The Umayyad, the one Emir, flees to Spain, starts the Umayyad dynasty in Spain, where there were Arab military leaders who had previously conquered the Visigoths. You can just say Goths, it's fine. And they accept him as his leader. The Umayyad dynasty actually ends up lasting for 3 centuries in Spain, so for quite a while, and they are well known for an emphasis on math, philosophy, poetry. So it's a really kind of highly developed, high culture interests. So this is the plan of the mosque. Just like we saw the plan of all the other buildings that we've looked at, kind of like not exactly a blueprint, but very similar, right? Um, all the dots are columns. So you can see, boy, there are a lot of columns in this interior space, which makes this, of course, a hypostyle hall. You should be able to answer that question. I mentioned earlier the courtyard. The courtyard would have had fountains and orange trees. I think in the image that we saw earlier, it still does have trees. I don't know if the fountains are still there. So the mihrab, which I mentioned, right, which is the niche in the Qibla wall that orients, indicates which way Mecca is right there. And of course, that's the Qibla wall. All right. So what's of particular note in this mosque? What you definitely need to remember are, I already mentioned the columns for spolia, but we have these really incredible double horseshoe arches here. We can see that the columns are not just holding up a single arch, but an arch on top of another arch, right? And these were borrowed from this style was borrowed the uh, from the Visigoths. The style itself was borrowed from the Visigoths, and so they're really spectacular. You notice that the stone is striped, right? We call that voussoirs, Voussoirs. The kind of striped, the different kinds of stone, creating a striped look to it. You also can see it kind of has a horseshoe shape. It kind of is a bit wider, closer to the bottom than you might expect. So it creates a horseshoe shape. That is also something that was adopted. I mentioned earlier these double arches, but that was also adopted from the Spanish Visigoths. Horseshoe arch. The double arches also serve the purpose of raising the roof higher, of course. And these horseshoe arches become associated with Muslim architecture, but of course they're originally from the Visigoths. And these horseshoe arches also kind of add to the airiness of the space, right? We don't have a heavy, low ceiling. We have one row of arches, which is topped by another row of arches. So it kind of lifts the eye up and emphasizes all the air above, the space above, which in a religious or a spiritual context may make have a really positive effect. There's the spelling for you. So essentially, with this piece, we have the idea of the triumph of Islam because it's erected on what used to be a Christian church. Of course, that site used to also was once held a Roman temple, right? I've mentioned the spolia, mentioned the hypostyle hall. The mosaics of the interior, okay? Now, I've mentioned Byzantine art, talked about mosaics, we've looked at some mosaics, San Vitale, and uh, there are lots of mosaics in this church, but the design is Islamic. And I didn't mention this on my previous note, but I should have, or my previous video, but I should have. When we talk about Islamic design or Islamic decoration in a religious context, we do not have human figural imagery. We do not show people. So all like the mosaics of like Justinian and Theodora, or Christ in Hagia Sophia, that's a no go. You know, showing humans is a no go. And that is called aniconism. 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 So that is forbidding figural imagery. And specifically, we're talking about aniconism in a religious context, because you have other works from Islamic cultures that do show the human figure, but they are not religious pieces; they are secular pieces. So we'll notice that with Islamic decoration, with mosaics, beautiful, beautiful mosaics here. There's emphasis on vegetal, plant motifs, lots of swirls with lines, curvilinear lines. There's also a great emphasis on script, writing. The writing would be, of course, from the Quran, right? But it's really rich and elaborate. So the mosaics here are Byzantine, but the design is Islamic. We have an exterior shot. Of course, we have the Vusar here, right? We have, again, the horseshoe arch. We have horseshoe arches overlapping other horseshoe arches. We see the columns, which appear to be they're not exactly Doric or Tuscanic, but they're something like it. There were the mosque was expanded several times, 3 times over the 200 years. I believe I already mentioned that. There were additions made to it, obviously, throughout the expansion. The prayer hall was expanded. Domes were added. It has a really amazing dome. I think I have a slide about this. There were gates, monumental, big, large, impressive gates. Think about why the gates are supposed to be so large, so impressive. Large gates added to the eastern and western sides. We want to remember the Great Mosque of Cordoba for its really colorful masonry, as we see here, and the overlapping horseshoe arches. You know what that's called? It's where the caliph is. You should know. Look at your notes. Right? It's the Maksura. We have these really crazy arches, which are multi-lobed. We call this a highly experimental space, really taking risks, doing new things with the space. So it's not just a regular arch, it's not even a horseshoe arch, it's this multi-lobed arch. We have lots of rich abstractions in patterns. I like how the mosaics here mimic the Vusar of the stone. This is not stone though, this is mosaic with these stripes. Totally covered in mosaics. The idea here is we want to suggest the kind of richness and not just monetarily but spiritually that was left behind in Damascus when the Umayyads were kicked out of Damascus. Okay, so kind of a longing for that homeland, right? And like we can even do it better than we had it back in Damascus. There is the interior of the dome. You see these beautiful crisscrossing arches with the dome. These are squinches, not pendentives, right? Really beautiful. I want you to really take in, and all of this is covered in mosaic. Pretty much, that's not, but pretty much it's all covered in mosaic. So this is right in front of the mihrab. Okay, you know what the mihrab is, right? And I will finish this up in it would take me just a few seconds to finish it up in the next video.